So that is why in this drawing here, I'm really digging in. You saw a moment ago, I'm blending. I'm blending really heavily, and you can see me using my finger there. This is how I like to draw, folks. You don't have to draw with the same technique as me. This is my technique typically, but you can use a tissue, you can use a blending stump, whatever works for you. I use the tip of my finger. You saw me take my shadows and I drug them into the lights to create my halftone so that that shadow softly turned a corner and graduated into the light so that I have the beginnings of form. And now you see me using my kneaded eraser, bringing my highlights into that to turn those forms. And remember, those highlights have the tendency to fall on the corners between forms. You see that in there. When we look close here at the nose, at the cheek, there's a highlight at the crest of the nose, and then there's a plane change. And then there's a highlight between the nose and the cheek, that concave form where two planes meet. And then at the crest of the cheek, there's a highlight, and that gives us form. Halftone on the right-hand side, the side plane, and then a highlight at the crest, and then halftone again in the front planes, and then highlight again as we turn it towards the nose, and then halftone on the right-hand side of the nose, and then highlight at the crest of the nose, then halftone at the front plane of the nose, and again, back and forth. Side plane, highlight, front plane, side plane, highlight, front plane. That is what gives us form. That's what conveys form to the eye. So I've softly blended in my halftones, and then my kneaded eraser is giving me those highlights. And so we're quickly getting those forms to read for us here. And I should say here, we also have underplanes in the shadows. So that gives us front plane, side plane, and underplanes, a strong three-dimensional statement. So I'm just taking a look and evaluating my drawing here, taking a second out. I need to make sure that neck is a cylinder. And so, above all, before any detail, I pull those tones around. You saw me pull the tones out of the hair into the neck, right there as I'm doing now. And I pull some tones around from the left as well, so that we have the feeling of a cylinder with half tones wrapping around and a highlight there on the right hand center. Getting that highlight, a little bit of that highlight into those lips. They're a little bit more reflective with that little bit of lipstick, which has a little bit of a sheen to it. So I'm getting those highlights in there. Be sure you don't overdo it. Once again, you're looking at the model and you stare into those highlights in and around the lips, and they feel very zingy and blingy. And you're just mesmerized by it. You fall into a trance and you can't help yourself. You start putting zingy electric highlights in there. And then you wonder why your drawing feels busy and why she looks like she's a decade older than she really is, because you've put all kinds of contrasty variation in there. So take the time to squint as we do. We've discussed squinting many times. Take the time to squint way down and just look at the simple statement of the model, and don't let your contrasts interfere with that simple statement. So I think we're progressing nicely here. We're about 20 minutes into our demo here, just shy of 20 minutes, and we've got the light and shadow established. We have our halftone and highlights established. I think we're making good progress here. Dropping that necklace in, don't have to be too complicated with it. I just drew a little line to give me where that necklace is, and then giving myself the breakup of it. Underneath that necklace is a drop shadow. So I'm getting that drop shadow, suggestion of a little shadow falling on the underside of that, and then getting that halftone in there. those forms there on her chest. The left-hand side is turning away from the light, so I'm making sure halftone comes in there. We look at that and we get fooled. On the left-hand side, that shadow coming from her chin that falls down her neck and across the top of her chest there, we want to believe that there's lots of bright light right there because it feels really bright next to that dark shadow. But it's not highlight, it's halftone. It just feels bright because of the contrast. Don't let yourself get fooled. So I'm using a little bit of technique here because I'm not going to put a dark background in this drawing, because for the sake of time and because I do think it serves this particular pose in this model, I often put a dark backdrop in there to let the light really feel illuminated on the hair. But in this case, I'm not going to take the time to do that. I don't think it's necessary. A more vignette drawing is appropriate. So I'm going to resort to some line drawing for the sake of that. So you see me bringing some lines around the outside of the figure, the outside of the hair, the head, and the shoulders to establish that silhouette. And notice that I'm overlapping, I'm wrapping around. Yes, I have an outline, but it's not a cutout outline. It's not one outline that goes all the way around the silhouette of the head and makes it a cutout form. It comes around and turns into the form. And then I have another line picking up behind it, coming from behind it, wrapping around in front. For instance, if you follow what's happening on top of the head there. And then I have another line coming from behind that and wrapping around. And just those few overlapping lines give me a tremendous amount of depth on the outside of my portrait on that big silhouetted shape.